Hey, hope you're well. In this one, I'll be taking a quick look at the new cordless plunge saw from British retailer Rutlands. I'm not associated in any way with Rutlands. I purchased this saw as part of a bundle, as any customer would, and I did that because this is actually the first cordless entry-level plunge saw available here in Britain. I'll be assuming a little bit of prior knowledge of this category of saw, and I'll be telling you what I like about the saw, what I don't like. I'll also be pointing out some of the pitfalls of this particular product, and I'll link up the full spec in the description as well for the folks that want the full feeds and speeds kind of story. So out of the box, there's the saw, a pair of 4 amp 20 volt batteries and a dual charger. That's pretty much it. There's a book of words and a dust extraction adapter, but no carry case, not even a dust bag for the saw. I bought the saw bundled with a 1.4 meter rail. Nice to see a single rail rather than two 700s. But again, that's all you get. No bag, no clamps. So the scope of delivery is definitely that of a budget deal. Now I've got to say that sticks in the throat a little bit, as this is still a £295 package including VAT. And I was also hit for a £7 next day delivery charge. No other delivery available. I'm all for retailers protecting their margins, but at an age of free next day shipping on orders over a certain amount, when I'm paying in full when pre-ordering well in advance, it just seems to be on the cheap side of thrifty. Anyway, the saw is visually very similar to anyone who's interested in the sector. It's a dead ringer for the Wen branded cordless saw that's available in the United States, and very much out of the same mold as the Triton, Titan and McAllister corded saws that I've looked at over the years. If you're not familiar with them, then budget plunge saws typically fall into two camps or patterns, the Triton Titan or the Einhell Parkside. They're similar but different enough to cause a few compatibility issues, and maybe we'll get to talk about those a little bit later in this video. Later this year, I'll also have a 2024 roundup of entry-level plunge saws, so watch out for that if you're on the fence about considering a purchase. The Rutlands saw is more like the cordless Triton. I'd put it at the top end of entry-level saws, with soft start and a nice break on the blade, though I'm happy to say that they've left out the user-hostile anti-kickback safety feature. The saw comes fitted with an own brand 48-tooth blade. That's a 165 by 20mm bore with a skinny 1.6mm kerf common to cordless saws, and I'll run a couple of quick cut tests later in the video. Unlike many of the higher end cordless saws that'll work on a single battery, this one needs both batteries fitted, so it is a 40 volt saw. The weight of that concerned me a little bit, but actually with both batteries on board, it weighed in at 5.7 kilos, only slightly more than the corded Triton. The supplied guide rail is the standard Makita pattern with a little anti-tipping lip, and there's a dingus on the saw base that clips into that. I've said before many times that that lip causes more problems, especially with accessories, than it solves in everyday use, and I'll be updating my Which Rails Work video before too long as well. As I said before, the rail comes as a 1.4 meter single piece rather than two 700s that you typically see, and the saw is also available without a guardrail at a reduced price of £250, including VAT. The saw feels good in the hand, with a solid metal base and well-placed controls for all the usual adjustments for depth of cut and angle of bevel, and clearly marked scales and indicators, so there shouldn't be any guesswork involved. And the saw has provision for a scoring cut as well, if you prefer to use that in melamine or veneered boards. There's a blade change position on the selector as well, and the Allen key stores in the handle. No cable to attach it to on this saw. All right, enough chat. Let's get this saw on a rail and see how it cuts. There's the usual little cams on the base of the saw to snug it down onto the main rib of the rail. And I'll just trim the guide rail Splinterguard back on a sacrificial piece of MDF. Then I'll just cut a narrow rip in this 18mm birch fly to see how that looks. Actually, that looks pretty great, as you would expect from a 48 tooth blade, from a saw of this price, to be perfectly honest, especially brand new. Making the same cut in a 2-inch thick piece of cherry is asking a lot with this blade, especially as it's right on the depth of cut limit. So I took it fairly slow and steady, but again, it did the job pretty well, didn't bog down too much and left a really good finish. So a completely unfair and unreasonable sort of test for a 48 tooth blade in a cordless saw, but yeah, no real problems with that. A few little saw marks on there, probably due to me pausing a little bit. We had hit a little bit of a knot in there, which is where you heard that, but lovely smooth finish. Blade bogged down a little bit, I felt. Again, 48 tooth, not the blade to use, but in a pinch, good to know that you can do it. So let's get to the likes and dislikes. I do like the size and weight of the saw for a 40-volt saw. I was expecting it to be heavier than it is. I do like the soft start, the blade break, and the thin curved blades that make the most of the brushless motor. It's a standard blade size as well, which means that there are plenty of third-party options available too. The dust collection is also decent, as it should be for a plunge saw with a mostly enclosed blade, but it's a budget saw decent. No better than that. It's also surprisingly quiet too, with that brushed motor. As for the dislikes, well, this is where it starts to get a little bit awkward. Cordless saws are generally more expensive because you're buying into a battery platform. Once you have the batteries and charger, then tools from the same manufacturer are often available bare, so that you can use your existing investment in batteries with those other tools. That's not the case with this saw. Rutlands don't offer this or any of their other cordless tools, as far as I can tell, as bare units, and that's because there's a distinct lack of compatibility between their cordless tools. I double-checked with Rutlands customer service on this because I couldn't quite believe it, to be honest, but the response confirmed it, and I quote, "The saw has a standalone battery platform within our product range, and the batteries are not compatible with any other of our power tools." That's bad enough, but it actually gets worse though. My YouTube pal Leo at the Hand Eye Craft channel has the Rutlands 18-volt miter saw, and the batteries for that are only compatible with the Rutlands cordless biscuit jointer. There are many other 18-volt cordless tools in the Rutlands range: a brad nailer, handheld planer, circular saw, jigsaw, but no indication anywhere as to the battery compatibility between them. Now, maybe this 20-volt standalone battery platform will develop into something more significant if other tools are added, but right now I'd say it's more of a silo than a platform. Now, to the best of my knowledge, Rutlands don't actually manufacture. They're buying in white label products and having their branding applied. This is nothing new. The motor industry has had this badge engineering for decades, and it's very common amongst smaller retailers and manufacturers, as it gives them own brand products just like the big boys, but it does lead to some anomalies, and not just with battery compatibility. So I mentioned earlier about the two types of entry-level corded plunge saws. Rutlands have their own corded plunge saw based on the Einhell Parkside pattern, and longer-term viewers may remember that the slight issue with those is that they have a slightly wider base than usual, which makes them incompatible with the anti-tipping lip on the Makita rails. So now we've got a situation where the Rutlands corded plunge saw won't work on the Rutlands 1.4 meter rails intended for their cordless saw. Now, I want to be absolutely clear, none of that makes this a bad tool. It's a perfectly capable cordless plunge saw, and at $295 including that, it is good value. The DeWalt cordless with a similar bundle, saw, rail, a battery and charger, is more than double that at 670 odd, and the Makita more again. And to put it into perspective, just the Festool dual battery charger with a pair of batteries costs more than this entire saw. Just be aware though, with the Rutland saw, that you really are painting yourself into a corner with the batteries. Continuing with the moaning, the Rutlands supplied dual charger isn't a fast charger. It's quoted as 2 hours to charge a pair of batteries. So if you've got a lot of cutting to do, then an extra pair of batteries, you do need a pair, remember, an extra pair of batteries at 90 quid would definitely need to be on your shopping list. The Rutlands pricing on other accessories is a little bit all over the place as well. You can save yourself 45 quid by opting not to have the guide rail, but there's no bundle offer if you wanted 2 rails. They ask you the standard 70 quid for that extra rail. That's more than an OEM Makita rail on Amazon, and you'd still need to buy joining bars and rail clamps. In all seriousness, if you want the convenience of a cordless plunge saw for breaking down full sheets, whether that's in your garden or in the car park of your local store, and if you can live with the battery situation, then skipping the Rutlands rails altogether and putting that 45 quid that you've saved towards the Evolution G2 guide rail set with a rail blag and a pair of clamps and the best joining bars around, all for 100 quid, would probably be my choice. But the whole battery situation and the lack of transparency around it really leaves me feeling a little bit uneasy, and with only one source for the batteries and only one tool that you can use them on, even if the price has some real appeal, I think I'd be inclined to look elsewhere. So those are my initial thoughts. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Am I expecting too much from a budget cordless tool to be able to use the batteries in other tools from the same manufacturer? Or do you think 295 is far too much for this to be considered a budget tool? Or maybe you're just happy with battery diversity, knowing that your blue batteries are for your hammer drill and your yellow ones are for your chop saw. I'll call this one done for this week though. Thanks so much for taking a look. Leave me a comment, hit subscribe while you're there, and I'll catch you in the next one. All right, take care.